Well, then you're not
defense.
like libertarian,
So I'm not
right?
an ANCAP. So I'm not an ANCAP.
Well, you're not a libertarian. You're in favor of literally the most tyrannical element of statehood. You're like, I don't want there to be business taxes, but I am okay with police states and authoritarian regimes. It's like you don't comprehend what is or isn't acceptable reprisal on a social level. You say you're a libertarian, but you're okay with the police and the military, the least libertarian institutions in the world. And then when we get right down to it, who said 2 million people had to be given water? Who said water is a human right? I do say that. How dare you even pose that as a question?
Hey, do you hear me all right?
Yes, I can. I can hear you just fine. What's up?
What's up, man? Nice to be on the show.
Yeah, nice to have you on. All's pretty informal here, so no need to stand on occasion. I appreciate you coming on. Tell chat watching who you are and also what you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, so my name is Ian Asser Ramatarsing. I'm a political scientist from the Netherlands. And yeah, I'm a big Ayn Rand fan. I'm an objectivist, but I started out as a Marxist actually when I was 15. And I was actually very pro-Palestinian up until like 17, 18. Then I read Ayn Rand, my life changed, and I became some sort of right-wing quasi-politician. But I'm trying to promote libertarianism and objectivism in the Netherlands.
I gotta say, I'm very curious as to how libertarianism could possibly lead you to support Israel, considering the fact that in terms of like the representation of statehood, Israel is much more like willing to impose force on the freedom of individuals than anything like represented by Palestine.
I get where you're coming from. I wouldn't say like I'm a fan of Israel. I would say if I would have to make a choice in the conflict, which side I would support, I would go with Israel. So in a situation where there would be some sort of secular or like moderate government in Gaza, and they would be able to represent themselves, I would be fine with them having a Palestinian country. I would fully support that.
But there
so
was
in that sense, yeah.
Well, there
Go
was
ahead.
a secular moderate government, and it was sort of like deliberately pushed out by Israel. Like Israel took the land, ethnically cleansed the area, have been restricting the rights of the Palestinian minority for nearly a century now, and Netanyahu and his predecessors have worked to push the Palestinians into a position where they're more and more likely to radicalize and sort of militantly oppose Israel, which I can't really blame them for, considering the fact that peace didn't really get them anywhere.
You mean you can't blame the Palestinians?
Yeah, I can't really blame the Palestinians for thinking that, like, militant terrorism is the only potential solution for them, considering the fact that, like, there were decades of, like, Palestinian Authority and efforts at peace talks, and it seemed like no matter what happened, just the Palestinian rights got eroded further and further.
But it is the Palestinians' fault that they're ruled by Hamas, right?
Well, I don't think so, no.
It just happened to them. They all just chose Hamas involuntarily. Come on, like,
well, no,
they have
the conditions that they had a secular popular leadership. It didn't do anything. The idea to just throw your arms up in the air and go like, oh, guess they chose this, like, really kind of overwrites. If they just chose this, Israel wouldn't have had to put their thumb on the scale so aggressively.
I wouldn't go so far to say.
Also,
I
quick
guess
question.
they chose this.
Really quickly,
sure.
as an anti-statist, why do you even care that they support Hamas? Hamas is an anti-state, like, terrorist organization that's trying to break the back of the of the statehood that is violating the, their rights. Like, principally speaking, shouldn't you be in favor of terrorism if it means breaking a population free from tyrannical statehood?
Well, I'm not an ANCAP, so I'm a minarchist, right? So I don't consider government to be an evil concept. I just think government needs to be strictly limited. So in that sense, I am an anti-statist if you're talking about interfering with the economy, taxation, all that stuff, but not when it comes to, like, there are legitimate functions of government. I recognize a couple of them.
Well, then you're
Defense.
not like libertarian,
So I'm not
right?
an ANCAP. So I'm not an ANCAP.
Well, you're not a libertarian. You're in favor of literally the most tyrannical element of statehood. You're like, I don't want there to be business taxes, but I am okay with police states and authoritarian regimes.
Well, I don't know how you guys have it in the US, but in the Netherlands, there are not that many libertarians. So the few that are there are separated by minarchism and ANCAPs. So the objectivists are always the minarchists. Then you have some Friedmanites, you have some Hayekians. They are minarchist. And then you have the ANCAPs. They like Rothbard, they like Hoppe. And that's basically the split in the Netherlands. But it's a very small fringe group here.
I mean, I'm also a libertarian, but like that stems fundamentally from desire for freedom.
Well, you say you're libertarian. I think it's a interesting
Well, I believe in
case
freedom
you
for
make.
people, not freedom for corporations. But, you know, whatever the case may be, like, there is no freedom in the Gaza Strip. Like, they literally are in a fence. Like, they're fenced off. There are automatic turrets and security cameras and snipers pointed inward at all times. Like, we're talking about a group of people who are, like, America, to some element at least, is a police state. They literally live in a prison. Like, they can't leave. Like, they're just kept in a camp, you know? Like,
Yeah,
it seems
but
like
they have.
Hamas is sort of like the, you know, in that context, you'd think that's a pretty appropriate breakage of statehood.
But you're leaving out so much context. Like, for instance, even if we go back to the Nakba incident, right, from 1948, I think it was. Yeah, like, I am sure that there was aggression on the side of Arab states, and they convinced the Palestinians to, like, let us have a go at Israel, and it failed, and Israel clapped back. That is not saying the clapback was fully good. Obviously, I'm sure there were war crimes on both sides. I acknowledge all that. But
So wait, what do
in
you think
terms, yeah,
happened?
what I think happened, I think there were tensions. I think the Arabs were very displeased with how the land was divided up. And I might even agree with them on that for a great part. Uh, and the Arab states surrounding were not happy, like Syria. So they said to the Palestinians, like, let's have at them. And
Okay,
then it failed. And
so
Israel clapped back and took, like, Jerusalem and took
no.
pieces of land.
No, in 48, the Palestinians lived there. The British mandate in the area, like, that was like Arab territory. There were Jewish groups there, but like for the most part, like the
And they
Palestinians lived
bought a
there.
lot. They bought a lot of land, those Jewish groups.
Yeah, well, the United Nations voted on the partition plan, which divided the territory into Jewish and Arab sovereign states. The plan was rejected by Palestinian leaders, but, you know, their word didn't count for much. So with like foreign rule and imposition dividing people up, it led to increasing conflict until eventually, with overwhelming military might and munitions backed by the British, the Zionists cleared out nearly 1 million Palestinians and took over most of the land that was controlled by Palestinians. This wasn't like a back and forth between two militaries. There were indigenous people in the land, and based on the imposition of foreign governments, because a bunch of European powers felt guilty about the whole World War II thing and really wanted to make sure they could establish a sovereign Jewish state. They did so there, and it ended up in like the literal ethnic cleansing of the area. Like just, it wasn't like a back and forth. Like, the power differential was massive.
I think we can both agree that, like, carving up land after World War One and Two, like, a lot of people got fucked over. The Kurds got fucked over. In this case, you could say the Palestinians got the raw end of the deal. I'm not denying that, but if you look at the cards they were dealt in 1948, do you think that they could have chosen a better path than they had,
Every group.
relying on their Arab nations to keep attacking Israel, fully going for terrorism,
But you're simplifying.
rejecting all those offers they got after all that happened? Like, even in
What
2000,
offers
they got
have?
an amazing deal.
What offer? What deal? Well, so wait. First
The
of all,
Camp,
I reject the
Camp
premise
David,
here. I reject the
the Camp
premise here
David.
because every group could have done better always. Like, that doesn't mean anything. But in terms of like how things have gone since then, for the Palestinian people, it has just been the slow loss of their rights and the crushing of their land into a smaller and smaller portion. This isn't like subjective or whatever. The UN keeps denouncing this, but the US is on the Security Council, and we care about Israel continuing to exist, so we back them. Like, the idea that the treatment of the Palestinian people has been continuously horrendous and unjustifiable is a broadly held position. The Palestinians aren't doing anything to the Israelis. Like, what is there, like, an Israeli state that's being crushed into nothing, and 1 million Israelis being dispossessed the other way around? Like, there's no comparison. There is very clearly one powerful group and one powerless group getting squeezed tighter and tighter over time.
So you're telling me that if there was, like, some moderate government in Palestine, Palestinian Authority, that would invite the Arab nations that used to attack Israel and would ask them, invest in our economy, we want to make a nice democratic state over here, they know that would be very good for their profile. Do you think America would say, nah, Israel, we got to put it down?
There was. The Palestine Liberation Organization was a non-violent governmental org that tried to represent the Palestinian people and try to get a diplomatic solution to the many, many human rights abuses Palestinians suffered from. And it didn't go anywhere.
And that's all up to the Israelis.
Well, I don't know what you mean by that. The Palestinians had a non-violent government. It didn't lead anywhere. Israel's continued to crush them with time. Like what? So out of curiosity, let's say the Palestinians have, they did, so this isn't hypothetical, but let's say they had a non-violent coalition that tried to like seek diplomatic resolution with Israel, and Israel just kept violating their human rights and didn't do anything, and nothing got better. What would you suggest the Palestinian people do?
In that case, I think, because the world is watching, that a country like America, countries like France would definitely intervene.
But that happened and they didn't. Okay, but what if they didn't?
Well, obviously, everyone has a right to self-defense, right? So, like, I'm going to agree with that. Yeah, okay. In that case, then I would grant your point. Yeah. If that happens, then I would say the Israelis are not within the realms of reason. I agree with you, Vaush. If that would happen.
So then what should the Palestinians do then, hypothetically, if Israel was not conducive to like democratic solution making?
Well, they could offer, obviously, they could fight back.
The only group here doing mass killings are the Jews. They're the ones doing the mass killings. The mass killings are happening, not hypothetically, but in reality, and they're being done by an advanced military state, and it's the Jews doing it. Like, that's the group doing it.
Hamas is doing all the killing it can do. You agree with me on that, right?
What does that even mean?
Well, literally what it says, like, everyone they can kill, they will kill. They showed that when they had a couple of hours in Israel.
No.
If they had the opportunity,
they didn't
they're going to kill the most.
They didn't attack against Israeli civilians. Israel has been doing attacks against Palestinian civilians many times over. If your argument is that Hamas is somehow more violent than Israel, then this is like mathematically unprovable.
Well, I would say Hamas has less opportunity to be violent.
Almost like they have significantly less power.
I agree, they have less power. I agree. But it doesn't make them the moral side because they have less power.
I'm not
doesn't
saying,
mean anything.
I'm not saying that Hamas is the moral side. I'm saying the Palestinians are, broadly.
Yeah, but as long as Hamas is a representative of the Palestinian people,
they weren't for decades.
You can't separate those two. You cannot.
You can. Yeah, what you're describing is literally the pretext for a war crime, collective punishment. You're describing.
All war is collective punishment.
No, it is not. Absolutely.
Yes.
No, the indiscriminate slaughter of civilians because of the government, then you just think all war is war crimes.
Yeah, but I do think that when you're fighting a dictatorship, it's different than when you're fighting a democracy.
There isn't a dictatorship there. It's just an open-air prison. It's not a country. They don't have a military.
But so you don't consider Hamas to be a dictatorship?
It's a prison that Israel created that has a prison gang that runs it. They had a government, and that government tried to fight for their rights, and it didn't work. Israel wouldn't listen.
But right now, Hamas is the governing institute in Gaza, right?
They are the only group with power there apart from Israel. Like, they're a prison gang, sure. Like, in the sense that a prison gang could take control of a prison. But who built the walls?
You know what? I get where you're coming from. I would just put way more agency with the Palestinians. I just think you're only viewing it from one side because they have more power.
I mean, generally speaking, the group with the more power is supposed to be the one to right the wrongs, especially when on one hand, the Palestinians have done basically nothing to Israel, and Israel has engaged in decades of genocide and ethnic cleansing.
Come on. There were like a lot of attacks.
If you want to do like
before they build the wall, there were a lot of suicide attacks.
There have always been more deaths.
A lot of intifadas, a lot of rockets. I
am coming on here. If you want to compare the number of deaths on both sides, it has always been more Palestinians dead. The number of Palestinians, if you include the numbers who have been displaced from their homes, never to return because they've never been given right to return, it goes into well over 1 million people. What does that compare to? Some bottle rockets fired across? Israel's a modern military state. Maybe they could just not do the ethnic cleansing. Maybe Israel could use its enormous power to just do what every other modern Western state has done and not be an apartheid state. But they can't do it because they are obsessed with the idea of being a Jewish ethno-state. So they won't. The people there, both Israelis and many of them, because Israelis tend to be pretty far right in the issue, and their government are militantly opposed to the idea of handing over any power in government to Arabs.
If you want to eradicate 40,000 people, some estimates are up to that from Hamas fighters, it's going to cost a lot of people's lives. Like,
then don't do it.
That's terrible.
No, you don't get to just like, oh well, sadly our goal involves killing 1 million civilians. Guess we have to kill 1 million civilians. You just don't do it.
But the goal is self-defense, right?
No, it's not. No. Hamas is the one acting in self-defense. Israel did this to the Gaza Strip. Israel isn't acting in self-defense. They're the ones who created the situation. Israel didn't exist here. They partitioned the territory, Nakba'd the Palestinians, fought war after war.
They did not partition. The UN partitioned.
They partitioned with the consultation of Zionist groups, and Zionist militias were given weapons and then a full-on army. Yes, they did not directly do it, but they were fully part of the process, consented to it, and were participant in the removal of the Palestinians during the Nakba. Time after time after time, it's Israelis who have been the aggressors. And now, after cramming a bunch of Palestinians into a concentration camp, they act indignant that a few bottle rockets find their way out. Well, I'm really sorry, Israel, but you did make all of this happen, and you could stop it. Israel could stop it and make life better for them and for the Palestinians. They're jeopardizing their own safety. The safety of Israeli people is jeopardized every time that dumb fuck Netanyahu, who, by the way, the Israelis voted for, as long as we're doing the you're responsible for who you vote for bit, okay? Netanyahu has continuously jeopardized the safety of Israeli civilians by putting them at odds with every neighboring Arab state. Constant aggression and aggression and aggression. They're never going to live there peacefully if you keep throwing rocks at everyone you live by and the people you live next to, the Palestinians. Like, at the end of the day, Israel just does monstrous shit all the time, and it gets so fucking indignant when anything bad happens to it, when it causes, like, why does everyone hate me? I don't know, dude. Have you done anything hateable, Israel? Have you done anything to antagonize your neighbors? I wonder.
So what did you expect to happen in, like,
wait, really quickly, I just have to say, I hate this. What do you expect to happen? Okay, if Israel did something, they did something. I'm not talking about like, oh, after this, what do you expect? If they did a thing, they did a thing. What did Israel expect? Did anything obligate Israel to make millions of Palestinian refugees? Was there like a divine mandate that made them do it? It was their choice. They chose to do that because the people who did it were evil. And that's all there is to it. In the Gaza Strip, even before the conflict, only like 10% of people.
Why would Israel owe them water?
They live in Israel. It's Israel territory. What do you mean owe them water?
They left the Gaza Strip in 2005.
What? It's still Israel. The military occupation left. It's still Israel. Israel controls the water in. This is what I mean. This is why I like talking to people like you, because you're fucking monsters. You go through like the runabout, but then I hear, well, why would it be bad exactly for Ukraine to do war crimes back? It's like you don't comprehend what is or isn't acceptable reprisal on a social level. You say you're a libertarian, but you're okay with the police and the military, the least libertarian institutions in the world. And then when we get right down to it, who said 2 million people had to be given water? Who said water is a human right? I do say that. And if people like you are the kinds of people that Palestinians had to deal with when they tried to fight for their rights, no shit they turned to Hamas. Because they probably thought that, I don't know, suicide bombing buildings full of people like you was a far more effective route to their freedom than trying to explain to people like you why they deserve to have water as a human right. How dare you even pose that as a question? Like, because Israel left, like, the military occupation, they just die now? They just get to die?
They chose Hamas.
They chose Hamas. I'm choosing to end the call.
Of the water.
Nice. What a fucking monster, dude. That guy pivoted off of fucking everything, dog. Holy shit. He started grinning. He grinned nervously, yeah.